Imagine waking up on a quiet Saturday morning, tightening the last bolt on a bridge you built with your own hands, only to hear a voice behind you crack like a whip. That bridge is coming down today. What happens next isn't just a dispute. It's a full-blown war over property rights, power, and the truth buried beneath GPS coordinates and concrete survey markers. This is the story of how one man with the facts and the patience to prove them brought an entire HOA to its knees. And it all started with a 16-foot bridge, a clipboard, and a woman who thought authority could replace accuracy. If you're into real stories where everyday people stand up for their rights, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And hey, share this with someone who's ever dealt with an HOA, because they'll feel this one in their soul. It began with something simple, almost boringly ordinary. A wooden bridge stretched over a narrow creek at the edge of Wyatt's land. 16 feet of treated lumber, hand-cut, measured twice, leveled with the kind of precision only a 14-year land surveyor could bring. To Wyatt, it wasn't a statement or a rebellion or some grand construction project. It was just a practical solution, something built slowly over 3 weekends while the fresh smell of pine rose from every board he laid. But quiet mornings have a way of turning loud without warning, and just as he tightened the final bolt, he heard the sharp, snapping rhythm of heels behind him. Then a voice, sharp enough to slice through the air. "That bridge is coming down today." He didn't turn immediately. He didn't need to. He knew the type. The clipboard clutched so tightly it might crack. The blazer pressed harder than the attitude wearing it. The look of someone who believed rules were weapons and authority was the only language that mattered. Standing at the foot of the bridge was Judith Callahan, HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates. She launched straight into accusations, violations, codes, approvals, architectural reviews, throwing section numbers like confetti at a parade. Most people froze when hit with that barrage. Most people folded at the first mention of bylaws or official notices. But Wyatt wasn't most people. He was a licensed surveyor. He lived in a world where facts were measured, not invented, where boundaries were math, not opinions. Before he'd even cut the first plank for the bridge, he had checked, rechecked, and triple verified the property line, his land, his jurisdiction, not the HOA's. So when Judith claimed authority over the creek crossing, Wyatt pulled out the documents, a certified deed, the county recorded plat map stamped with his own professional seal, and a highlighted boundary showing the HOA's territory ended meters away from where the bridge touched the ground. Anyone else might have taken one look and backed down. But Judith didn't blink. She dismissed the map as inconclusive, the survey as questionable, and the GPS data as irrelevant to community standards. Those were the moments Wyatt recognized exactly what was happening. This wasn't about a bridge. It wasn't about aesthetics or safety or codes. It was about control. It was about someone used to hearing yes suddenly crashing into a man who couldn't be bullied because he knew the truth down to the centimeter. When she couldn't win with claims, she tried threats, official reviews, fines, violations, legal action. Wyatt didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply told her what the documents already made undeniable. The bridge was fully on his land, completely outside HOA jurisdiction. That was the first moment the power shifted, even if Judith didn't realize it. She stormed off with stiff shoulders and a voice shaking with anger, promising formal consequences. But Wyatt just watched her go, already knowing how people like her operated. When they hit a wall, they didn't stop. They pushed harder. They escalated. They tried to reshape reality to match their authority. And here, on a quiet morning beside a peaceful creek, the spark was lit. Because Judith had no idea who she had just challenged. Wyatt wasn't just another homeowner. He was a man who literally defined property lines for a living. And this small conflict, born over a simple wooden bridge, was about to spiral into a battle of documentation versus domination, truth versus ego, and precision versus a clipboard wielded like a sword. The confrontation should have ended that first day, but people like Judith don't retreat. They reload. Wyatt knew it the moment she walked away, gripping her clipboard like she just lost a battle she wasn't willing to admit. And sure enough, the next 48 hours proved exactly what he predicted. It began with a letter, certified mail, official-looking header, and 3 dense paragraphs claiming he'd violated HOA construction codes. But what made Wyatt's jaw tighten wasn't the accusations. It was the hand-drawn map inside. Someone, clearly Judith, had extended the HOA boundary by several meters, swallowing the creek and Wyatt's bridge into territory that wasn't theirs. It was a crude sketch, lacking coordinates, missing scale, and legally worthless. But it was also deliberate. That was the first real sign. This wasn't ignorance anymore. It was manipulation. Wyatt scanned everything, logged the false claims, highlighted every fabricated detail, and added it to a growing folder labeled Evidence Callahan. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was focused the way a surveyor becomes when a measurement doesn't add up. And then the online post started. A long rant appeared in the community group, written by Judith, framed like a public safety alert. She painted Wyatt as a rogue builder, ignoring rules, threatening property values, creating hazards. She even posted a photo of the bridge, taken from an angle that made it look crooked, unfinished, unsafe. The comments poured in. People he'd never met called him selfish, irresponsible, disrespectful. But what struck Wyatt most wasn't the criticism. It was how fast people believed her without ever checking facts. No one asked to see a survey. No one questioned the HOA's jurisdiction. They just accepted her authority as truth. That's when Wyatt called his brother Tanner. A lawyer, sharp and methodical in the same way Wyatt was precise. The moment he heard the details, his voice changed. Calm, focused, ready. Document everything, he said. Every comment, every message, every false claim. Don't respond. Let her dig her own hole. Wyatt did exactly that. Screenshot after screenshot. Dates, timestamps, usernames, a second spreadsheet tab labeled online harassment, 15 entries in the first hour. Tanner reviewed the images and didn't mince words. She's building a narrative. If she keeps this up, she's opening herself to defamation. But the boundary issue? That's the real battle. The harassment didn't stop there. 2 days later, the HOA called requesting a civil discussion. Wyatt agreed because he wanted to hear their justification face to face. When he arrived, Judith was waiting with 2 board members, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Their tone was syrup sweet, the kind of politeness that hides poison underneath. They offered a compromise. He removes the bridge. They waived the fines. They even suggested helping him build a new one within HOA guidelines. Wyatt listened. Then he slid the certified survey across the table. County seal, coordinates, professional license. His voice remained steady as he pointed to the boundary line. This is where your authority ends. Judith didn't look at the map. She didn't address the data. Instead, she leaned on vague claims. Community standards, aesthetics, neighborhood. Evidence stacked into a mountain so high, even the most stubborn HOA president couldn't climb over it. That night, 2 police cruisers parked in front of Judith's house for nearly an hour. Lights off, engines running, neighbors peeking through curtains. The neighborhood finally witnessing the consequences she'd spent years avoiding. And as Wyatt watched from a distance, he felt no triumph, only certainty. Judith had crossed a line she couldn't pretend didn't exist. The HOA war wasn't just public now. It was irreversible. Chapter 3 was the moment the HOA war went public. Chapter 4 was when it evolved into something far more dangerous. A legal battle built on precision, documentation, and a growing pile of evidence that was now impossible for anyone to ignore. Wyatt walked into his brother Tanner's law office carrying a duffel bag full of binders, flash drives, printed screenshots, and time-stamped photos. Tanner cleared the entire conference table, and together they spread out the chaos like they were preparing for a military briefing. The survey plat went on one end, the vandalism photos on another, the online harassment logs filled the center like a digital battlefield, and the video of Judith removing bolts played silently on a laptop, the green night vision glow casting an eerie light across the room. Tanner studied each piece with the dispassionate focus of a surgeon. "This is airtight," he finally said, tapping the county seal on the official survey. "Her hand-drawn map doesn't stand a chance. Legally, it's not even admissible. It's just scribbles." But the real shift came when Tanner began listing the legal violations, one by one: trespassing, property damage, vandalism, harassment, false claims, online defamation, attempted removal of a legal survey monument, a serious offense in the eyes of the state board. Wyatt listened, not with anger, but with the kind of calm that comes from knowing the truth is finally stepping into the light. Tanner opened a fresh legal pad and outlined a plan. Gather everything, structure it, categorize it, build a timeline, and assemble a master document so detailed that any lawyer reading it would instantly know the HOA had no defense. "Make it like one of your survey reports," Tanner said. "Precise, technical, unbreakable." And Wyatt did exactly that. For 2 days straight, he created a system that could have belonged in a federal archive, every file labeled with an ISO date, Every incident logged with coordinates, timestamps, and supporting evidence. 3 spreadsheets became 7. Tabs for harassment, property lines, financial damages, HOA violations, witness statements, and the chain of custody for every piece of video or photo he captured. Tanner reviewed the completed folder and let out a low whistle. "This is better than what some legal teams produce," he said. "You just built the case I wish every client brought me." Meanwhile, the community began quietly reaching out. A woman who'd been fined for planting pink flowers instead of white. A man who'd been threatened for parking his truck incorrectly on his own driveway. Another who paid a mysterious administrative fee that didn't appear in any official HOA bylaw. 4 neighbors emailed Wyatt with their stories. All 4 confirmed a pattern. Judith didn't enforce rules. She invented them. One neighbor even forwarded internal HOA emails showing Judith had attempted to hire a surveyor to redraw the neighborhood boundary to include Wyatt's land. The surveyor refused, calling it fraudulent. She'd replied with 3 furious messages accusing him of lacking vision. Every message went into the evidence folder. Then came the biggest shock. The former HOA president contacted Wyatt. They met at a small cafe downtown where the man admitted Judith had forced him out 2 years earlier through manipulations, threats, and rumor campaigns. He slid a flash drive across the table containing financial records showing expenses that didn't match legitimate HOA use. "I should have fought her," the former president said quietly. "But she wore me down. You're the first person who's pushed back with facts instead of fear." Tanner read through the files that Friday evening and finally leaned back in his chair. "We're not just proving your innocence," he said. When Wyatt added the financial irregularities to his growing archive, the case shifted from a property dispute to something much larger, an entire history of abuse wrapped in authority and unearned power. "We're proving she's been abusing her position for years. When her lawyer sees this, he's going to tell her to surrender." And so the demand letter was drafted, formal, comprehensive, and devastatingly precise. It outlined every violation, every lie, every crime, every piece of evidence. 7 days to respond. 7 days to step back. 7 days before the lawsuit dropped like a hammer. The neighborhood had been simmering for weeks, but Chapter 5 marked the moment everything boiled over. When quiet murmur. Terrors behind closed doors turned into a full-scale community reckoning. It began with a simple notice taped to every mailbox in Meadowbrook Estates. Emergency HOA meeting. All residents strongly encouraged to attend. The sender wasn't Judith. It was the former HOA president, invoking a rarely used bylaw, allowing residents to call an independent session when leadership was behaving improperly. That alone sent a ripple of curiosity through the neighborhood. But what happened at the meeting would change everything. By 7 p.m., the community center was overflowing. People standing against walls, leaning in doorways, even peering through windows from outside. Conversations buzzed with tension, speculation, and the unmistakable sense that something big was about to break. At the front of the room sat Judith, stiff-backed, jaw clenched, clutching her clipboard like a life raft. 2 board members sat beside her, eyes nervous, expressions uncertain. Across from them, Wyatt set up a laptop and projector, calm and steady, organizing files with the same precision he used when mapping land. When the former president called the meeting to order, a hush fell over the room. "We're here," he began, "because serious concerns have been raised about boundary disputes, HOA authority, and actions taken by leadership." Judith immediately tried to stand, but he raised a hand. "Everyone will get their turn, but first, we look at the evidence." And that was the moment the night shifted. Wyatt stepped forward and clicked to the first slide. An aerial map of the neighborhood with official county-recorded boundaries overlaid in bright, undeniable lines. Gasps murmured through the crowd. His property was clearly outside HOA jurisdiction, by meters, not inches. Then came the annotated timeline, each event marked with coordinates, photos, and legal citations. The threatening letter, the fake hand-drawn map, the violation notices, the online smears. Comment after comment, each documented with usernames, timestamps, and screenshots. The room grew quieter with each slide, the weight of accumulated truth settling like stone. But the real breaking point arrived when Wyatt clicked play. The projector screen displayed the grainy night vision footage of Judith and her husband removing bolts from the bridge. The floodlight activated, illuminating their faces with perfect clarity. Several people gasped. One elderly man covered his mouth. Another whispered, "Oh my God." The footage of them prying at the boundary marker came next. Tanner had added subtitles explaining the legality of survey monuments, making it clear this wasn't just misconduct, it was a criminal offense. When the video ended, the silence was suffocating. And then, slowly, hands began to rise. Not in accusation against Wyatt, but in disbelief at Judith. A young mother stood. "You fined me for having pink flowers," she said, voice trembling. "There is no rule about flower colors. I checked after seeing your posts about him." Another resident spoke next. "You threatened to put a lien on my house over a recycling bin being visible." A third added, "You told me I couldn't park in my own driveway. That's not even in the bylaws." More voices followed. The pattern was undeniable. A 4-year reign marked not by leadership, but by intimidation. Judith finally stood, voice rising in panic. "He's manipulating all of you. GPS can be faked. Videos can be edited." But when the former president calmly asked her to produce any licensed survey documents supporting her claims, she froze. She had nothing, not a single report, not a single measurement, not even a name of a surveyor. The room shifted all at once, like a collective realization hitting simultaneously. Authority without accuracy was just noise. The former president raised a motion. "I move that we vote to remove Mrs. Callahan as HOA president effective immediately." A second came instantly. Hands went up, dozens, then more. The final count was overwhelming. 58 votes for removal, 3 against, 9 abstaining. Judith sank into her chair, clipboard slipping from her fingers as the reality washed over her. Her authority, built on fear and assumption, was gone. And for the first time in years, the community wasn't afraid to speak. They were awake. The fallout began quietly, almost eerily, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath after the vote that removed Judith from power. For the first time in weeks, Meadowbrook Estates felt still. No warnings taped to doors, no frantic posts in the community group, no late-night phone calls to police. But beneath that calm was a shifting landscape, one where consequences finally began tracing their way back to the person who had spent years evading them. Within days, the "for sale" sign appeared on Judith's front lawn. Not discreet, not subtle. A bright reflective board staked firmly into the ground, announcing what most residents already suspected. She was leaving. Some said her husband insisted on moving after the public humiliation. Others whispered that she couldn't face the neighborhood again. Wyatt didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply noted it as another entry in his timeline, a final chapter closing itself. The new HOA board moved fast. They reinstated the former president, brought in an independent auditor, and launched a full financial review. It didn't take long before the numbers told their own story. Over $12,000 in questionable expenses emerged. Administrative fees with no receipts, reimbursements tied to non-existent events, consulting payments without contracts. It was a pattern of behavior that matched everything Wyatt and the neighbors had learned. Authority used like a shield, decisions made without oversight, boundaries crossed because nobody had challenged them. The board voted to pursue restitution, though no one expected much to come of it. But what mattered wasn't the money, it was the principle. A message had been carved into the foundation of the HOA. Leadership wasn't a throne, it was a responsibility. Meanwhile, the county inspector arrived to investigate the spray-painted boundary line and the unauthorized signs Judith had installed on public property. His findings were immediate and firm. Not only was the boundary fraudulent, but the sign itself constituted an attempt to claim public land under private authority. The fines totaled $5,000. The state's professional board added another citation for creating false survey documentation without a license. And the police completed their report on the vandalism, adding charges for destruction of property and tampering with the survey marker, an offense that carried its own legal weight. For the first time, the consequences were real. They were documented, they were enforceable. And unlike the fictional rules Judith once wielded, these ones didn't bend. Wyatt, meanwhile, dismantled the temporary gate and QR system he'd installed across his bridge during the height of the conflict. He refunded every subscription, including a brief note thanking neighbors for their support and explaining that the experiment had proven its point. Property rights stood strongest when backed by facts, not force. The bridge returned to what it was meant to be, a simple crossing, open to anyone who needed it. But something had changed. People now paused when they walked across it. Some smiled, some waved, some simply nodded in quiet acknowledgement. That bridge wasn't just wood and bolts anymore. It had become a symbol of patience, of truth, of standing firm even when the pressure to yield was overwhelming. Over the next weeks, the neighborhood transformed. Residents began attending meetings again. Financial reports were published transparently. A new bylaw was added, requiring all future board members to undergo training in property rights and legal boundaries. The HOA hired a licensed surveyor to map every property line in the community, placing bright orange markers so clear that no future hand-drawn map could ever be taken seriously again. When the surveyor reviewed Wyatt's original data, he nodded with professional respect. "Your measurements were flawless," he said, "within 2 centimeters of our verification." And for Wyatt, that meant more than any vote, any apology, any victory. Accuracy had prevailed, precision had spoken, reality had won. In the months that followed, emails trickled into Wyatt's inbox, homeowners from other states who'd heard his story and wanted advice on dealing with their own HOAs. He replied to each one, offering what he knew. Know your lines, document everything, stay calm, stay factual, and remember that truth has momentum. One Saturday morning, as he stood on his bridge with a cup of coffee, he reflected on everything that had unfolded, the battles, the evidence, the sleepless nights, the victory. And then a single thought settled in quietly, like a final survey marker tapped into place. Boundaries don't exist to divide people. They exist to define what's real. And when someone tries to move them, all you need to fight back is the truth measured clearly enough that it cannot be ignored. The bridge stood where it always had. On his land, within his rights, documented beyond dispute. And this time, nobody was coming to tell him otherwise.